Welcome to the Whistleblower Newsroom. I'm Christina Borgeson. Recently, investigative reporter Jennifer Bilek was on this show talking about the big money and big agenda behind the transgender movement. The big agenda, Bilek says, is the creation of a huge new healthcare market for the medical field and big pharma by developing and dispensing drugs and procedures to a population of people who want to radically change their bodies and assume what Bilek refers to as synthetic sexual identities. A lot of money is being put into social engineering to rapidly grow this population by aggressively fostering normalization and acceptance of transgenderism to create a new paradigm that would no longer recognize the binary biological reality in which we currently live, where all creatures are either male or female, with a small percentage possessing some or both of those male or female characteristics. Part of this social engineering includes lumping transgender people in with lesbian, bisexual, and gay people, hence LGBT, and beyond that to LGBTQIA2S+. Meanwhile, some lesbian, bisexual, and gay people are standing up to oppose being included in the transgender community. They consider themselves members of the LGB community, and that's all. My guest today is LGB activist and former journalist Belissa Cohen, who says she's focusing on raising awareness of the negative impacts that transgenderist ideology and the promotion of synthetic sex identities are having on same-sex attracted and non-conforming people, as well as on women, children, and parents. Welcome, Belissa.
Hi, Christina. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
You said that you're focusing on raising awareness of the negative impacts of transgenderist ideology and the promotion of synthetic sexual identities, that the impact that it's having on same-sex attracted and non-conforming people, as well as on women, children, and parents. Talk about it.
The thing that people don't know, and I don't blame them, is that because of the forced teaming, we use that term, of the LGB with the T and now the other letters like QIA2S plus, and we don't know what the plus means. You would think that same-sex attracted people would know, but we do not. But anyway, there was a situation called forced teaming where same-sex attracted people, their acronym, was teamed with the T, which has nothing to do with same-sex attraction. It has to do with something else, thinking that your body isn't right, doesn't conform to the way that your mind thinks it should, or other things that maybe I don't even know about. But because of this forced teaming, the transgenderist movement kind of came in and Trojan horsed the movement for lesbian, gay, bisexual rights, same-sex attraction rights, and kind of piggybacked on that movement and kind of redirected it after, let's say, the fight for marriage equality was won and there needed to be a new direction, perhaps. Although there were still small battles to be won, gay people, we're mostly accepted. Things are okay for us. And then this, I would say, big pharma money, corporate money came in, seeded it into all the LGB organizations that had been created to promote the interests of same-sex attracted people, and kind of redirected all those organizations to promote transgenderism, the idea that you could be born in the wrong body, that you were wrong and needed to be fixed in order to live your authentic life, which is not true for lesbian, gay, and bisexual people.
Well,
We're
why
fine
do
the way
you
we
think they chose the LGB community to force team?
First of all, I think that with the AIDS crisis, Big Pharma took note of this untapped community that had a lot of money, had a lot of resources, had a growing amount of sympathy. They came in and they spent a lot of money in the gay community. All the gay magazines were wall-to-wall ads with medications for AIDS and HIV. So that situation resolved. And I think that it's just a normal corporate mentality to think of opening other markets, opening new markets. It's always about increasing profit. You don't resolve a situation and then close down and go away. You repurpose a market. So that market was repurposed, and they probably saw and thought a lot about what in the gay community, what were the issues that perhaps could be monetized. And I think the issue of both internalized homophobia and the dealing with external homophobia
What does
is
that
an
mean,
issue.
internalized homophobia?
Internalized homophobia is often called shame, gay shame, lesbian shame. The idea that you grow up and you can't talk about your feelings, everybody, and you hear a lot of people kind of saying, oh, that's gay, as a pejorative, or what are you, a fag, or are you a lesy? It's a very negative thing growing up with feelings of same-sex attraction. Even, I would say, in this day and age, now that the category of lesbian is really just a porn category at this point. So people who are same-sex attracted very often grow up in shame, even whether in religious households or in non-religious households. Many people still think that it's a lesser way to feel, even though societally it's like great to be gay. And so then there's the combination of the homophobia coming from society, which maybe people who aren't aware of it aren't as tuned into it, and then this coming from yourself, whereas people around you may not be homophobic. You worry that if you talked about what you really think and feel, people would react badly. You feel like if you told, let's say, a person of your same sex, hey, why don't we go out on a date? I think you're really cute, that they would not speak to you again or treat you differently, as opposed to a woman or a man saying that to somebody of the opposite sex.
An idea just occurred to me. You're talking about this. My thinking is they were thinking, here's a group, let's just tack onto them because they're different and they managed to resolve their situation. So let's just tack on the transgenders to the lesbian, gay, and bisexual. But there's a key difference.
Gay people don't necessarily think that we're born in the wrong body or that there's something wrong with us. That's not necessarily true. But if you take a population and you market this idea that you can escape the stigma of being gay, and you can LARP, which is a gaming expression, live action role play, that you can LARP as the opposite sex and actually pass in straight society, that's a very tempting idea for some people. So I think that—
Is that a tempting idea for gay people?
For some gay people, yes, it is. And what happened is that the transgenderist people who wanted to push these ideas, and if I know you spoke with Jennifer Billick, there are billionaires and corporations who really want to sell these ideas. So they came into the LGBT communities first, and they sold this idea that you could take these pills and you could have these surgeries and it would cure this problem that you have of deep-seated shame. Not everybody has it, but some people did. They did it, I think, as an experiment. They thought, let's see what we could do here. And it kind of caught on. And then the other thing that happened is with the forced teaming, it created gay people as the foot soldiers for these bad ideas, meaning that the gay people who didn't feel that they were born in the wrong body developed this idea that we're on the same team. We have deep sympathy for these people. We all know people.
Well, that's my point, is that it's not that gay people feel that they're born in the wrong body like these people do, but gay people are looked up, have been until, I mean, they fought hard. Yeah. And, I'm heterosexual. So if I say or do anything ignorant, just forgive me and call me on it, whatever. But, gay people were treated as other, is my point. They had this other, and these people are treated like other, and it's all about sexual identity or predilection or whatever. So I think they thought, oh, well, we can make this natural marriage with this group that has already made these big leaps, to be accepted, and they have a lot of money, so we can get them to put, we can give them money, and they've been successful at lobbying for themselves, so they'll lobby for transgenders too. I mean, that's what it looks like to me, talking to you now that you're saying all this stuff.
Somehow sexual orientation, homosexual or bisexual, which has more in common with heterosexual orientation, because it's all sexual orientation, has been conflated with identity and, as Jennifer Bilek would say, synthetic sex identities, which are being manufactured more and more and more in order to open markets and dissociate us from our sex bodies and from sexual dimorphism in order to market products. But so those things were conflated first for gay people. This whole T thing came into the LGBT communities, and we were forced teamed, like my LGBT center in Los Angeles is the biggest one on the planet. And I remember the T being added, and nobody knew why. It was added on, I believe, May 27th, 2014, officially.
Oh,
and
long ago.
And I could tell you some other stuff that happened around that happened in my community. Anyway, so we didn't know why. Nobody asked gay people. It wasn't a grassroots movement, kind of like the gay rights movement was a grassroots movement that came out of other civil rights movements. Well, this was what we call an Astroturfed movement. It was not grassroots. It came from the top down with money. And please see.
Yeah, but how did the leaders of these organizations explain it? Oh, we got all this money, so we have to promote these people. I mean, didn't anybody say, hey, that money should be for us? We're an LGBT organization. Nobody said that?
I don't know how many of us, who do we say it to? I mean, I wasn't paying attention. I had other things on my mind. I think most people weren't heavily political at that time. And why would we, like, I'm sure somebody said something, but I mean, that's a big ask.
So when did you wake up and say, well, hold up now, this is...
Well, I can't say nobody said anything. I can't say that. I don't know what the people who questioned it were met with. I really don't. But a lot of it's acknowledged that we really weren't paying attention. And then when you think of marriage equality, and that battle was won, when you talk about transgender rights, what rights do citizens in a Western democracy have that others don't have? So this whole manufactured idea of transgendered rights is such a red herring when, we all have marriage equality. There's probably some laws still on the books about sodomy somewhere or things like that. But if you're talking about the right to, for, let's say, people to claim to be the opposite sex, to get their driver's licenses, passports, birth certificates changed, for men to go into women's spaces, for women to go into men's spaces, to blur all these lines, it seems like what we're talking about when we talk about transgender rights.
I want to talk to you about these other letters. What does queer mean?
Well, queer is historically a horrible slur for gay people that ended careers and ruined lives. And it used to mean that you were same-sex attracted, and that was a horrible thing. And then briefly, I would say in the 80s or 90s, gay people started to reclaim it.
So it's redundant in this list of LGBT.
No, let me go on.
Okay.
So then now what queer seems to mean is it comes, I would think, from this queer theory. Have you heard about queer theory?
No.
Queer theory is an academic discipline that came out of, I would say, Berkeley, UC Berkeley. And there are a few people who kind of initiated it, and it's really spread throughout academia. And it's the idea that you should queer everything, that you should take anything that's normal, so-called normal, and turn it on its ear and turn it inside out and queer it. So you're seeing queering taking place in all areas of society. But at this point, queer seems to mean anybody, including heterosexuals, who has ever done anything kinky in bed or feels like they don't conform to sex-based stereotypes. So it's being reclaimed by straight people. It's a gay slur. And if anybody should be allowed to reclaim it if they want to, it's gay people. But at this point, straight people are using it, calling other people queer like it's an okay word, and also calling themselves queer. And people in heterosexual relationships that are, let's say, a man pretending to be a woman and a woman pretending to be a man, they call themselves queer when it's a heterosexual relationship. So it's very involved and crazy.
What's the I?
The I is intersex, which has also absolutely nothing to do with being gay, lesbian, or bisexual, or being transgender. It's a medical condition. We now call it differences of sexual development. And it's when you're born with some abnormality in your reproductive organs. It could be anything, the slightest thing to the most major thing. Differences in your chromosomes, differences in your morphology. It has nothing to do with thinking that you're born in the wrong body or that your body is wrong. And the transgender movement has weaponized intersex to use as an excuse. Well, what about intersex people? And it's a red herring.
What's interesting about intersex people is if you read the definition of intersex, that they still have male and female or female characteristics. There's just the development may not quite be there or whatever, but it's still binary. It's still male and female.
Yes, you get it. It's 100% binary, and it's being force teamed with the T. Again, we're having more force teaming of intersex, just like the LGB. And intersex people are not happy.
What is A?
A is asexual, which is now being claimed as a sexual orientation that because theoretically you have no desire at all and no orientation towards either homosexuality or heterosexuality or both. And that personally, I think that it's like if you don't want to eat or sleep or have sex, there's something wrong with you as an organism and you need to get help.
You know what strikes me about asexual being part of this? It's almost Orwellian, because if you're asexual, you have no sexual preference. You're still going to be a man or a woman.
Well, also,
you just don't want to have sex.
Well, also, I think you might also still have a sexual orientation. You might, I don't know. I think that lots of people go through phases in their lives where they don't feel sexual.
Yeah.
And probably some people go through their whole lives, but it's being, I think, greatly exaggerated. And there's so many psychological reasons and physiological reasons.
Yeah, hormonal, whatever. Yeah.
And I really think you need to get yourself checked out if you lack one of the basic human drives. It's probably a sign from the universe that you You
You
should
need to go to the
explore.
doctor.
Yeah, see a
Okay.
doctor.
What is two?
Well, two goes with S.
Oh, what's 2S then?
2S, and that's Two-Spirit, which is a term that was coined in the 90s by some people, one of whom was a white male psychologist or something, maybe a sociologist, for this Native American phenomenon that happened in a couple of tribes. We know that there are thousands of tribes with thousands of different cultures, but it's the idea that in Native American cultures, there is a third sex where that they honored and like respected people who wanted to be the opposite sex. And the reality is that while this happened in a couple of tribes, that it also tended to be a way to deal with male homosexuality, in that men who didn't fit the stereotype of the male could have another role and maybe have somewhat different or reduced status than males. But it didn't go the opposite way. Women could not opt out of womanhood and babies and all that kind of stuff and go off with the men and hunt and and do those kind of more powerful roles, take a wife, that kind of thing. So it's not only not culturally universal among indigenous people, it's also kind of like a very exaggerated concept. And also there's some other things like
It's certainly obscure.
It's obscure, but you hear it a lot. They even put it in the acronym now, 2S. So it's becoming, they're trying to promote this idea that it's a real thing and culturally universal among indigenous people. And there's also the idea, Christina, that indigenous people did not have sexual dimorphism. They did not have the concepts of male and female until white colonizers came in and explained this concept to them. So it's this idea that white people invented sexual dimorphism, invented the binary, and that it's a colonial concept, and that is why people should reject it, which is absolutely insane.
Oh my God, that's like the creation of a myth.
A lot of myths going on here. It's very religious. This whole movement is
like a cult.
Not only cult-like, but it's highly, highly religious.
What do you mean it's highly religious?
There's been this invention of a sacred caste, which is especially men who claim womanhood. They are a sacred caste. You cannot criticize them. They get extra rights. There's a religious nature to this idea. It's like transubstantiation in Catholicism, where your body can, change through these drugs, and you actually become the opposite sex. You take testosterone or estrogen, and all of a sudden, I will show you footage where a guy says that his reproductive cells became vaginal cells. Really? And these people think these things, and they really think that they become biologically the opposite sex. It's in a transubstantiation sort of way. And then there's catechisms that you have to say, like this one, trans women are women, trans men are men, and non-binary people are valid. You see that everywhere. It's a catechism. So there's very, very religious aspects to it's a belief system. It's a belief in a gendered soul, that your soul is the true arbiter of who you are, not your physical and material body, that brain and body can be separate, when we know that brain and body develop together at the exact same rate with the same DNA from the same cells, the same two cells.
Now I'm starting to understand how this is paving the way, not only for a huge new market, but for post-humanism.
Yeah, transhumanism.
Well, even past transhumanism into, I'm starting to think maybe there'll be a time when, you can't call humans who have had all kinds of procedures done or certain types of procedures new and yet as yet to be discovered, but soon to be, if all this money is being poured into it. These people will not want to be called human. They'll want to be referred to as something else.
Well, yeah, it's promotion, introducing the idea of extreme body modification, and transgenderism has been referred to as the on-ramp to transhumanism. And I really do think that they could have found other on-ramps. It's not the only one they could have found, but you see the route through the gay community that they took, and it kind of caught on. And so this is one route that they decided to weaponize this so-called gender dysphoria, which I don't use that term, but into making people think that they can just choose their body parts like we're meat Legos. And that will go into the wider society as extreme body modification, that you can just change not only your face and your body, but anything about you to become your anime avatar that you use online. And it's going to expand from sexual characteristics onward.
You've just made a connection between the gaming world and this whole transgender to transhuman to post-human.
Yeah.
That's how you recruit the kids. That's how you get the kids on board, besides the stuff that's happening in the schools right now, getting this sex education early on.
Well,
Oh,
yeah.
the gaming community. I hadn't even thought of that.
It's coming from a lot of areas, like many of us know what's going on in the schools with the indoctrination that you can choose whether to be a boy or a girl. And that's an intro, whether you can choose to be a boy or a girl. Maybe eventually you can choose other things, but that's chipping away at sexual dimorphism, which is what connects us to all the other organisms on the planet.
It's what connects us to nature.
Yeah.
And once you're disconnected from nature, then you can buy into all these different identities, like you see in your games. And then you can eventually, live in a virtual world that, again, you buy. And that's how these people are going to make literally trillions and trillions and trillions, as well as control the entire population of the globe if they're successful in doing all this.
And another way they're chipping away at people's sexual identity is via the porn industry, which has exploded since the invention of smartphones. And now even little, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old boys and girls can see porn on their smartphones 24 hours a day and talk about it with their friends. And especially with the shutdown, kids are not even getting together. They're all experiencing the world through screens. But porn is one of the things that they're experiencing the world through. And not only is there an explosion of violent porn, lesbian is a porn category. It's not adult human women loving each other. And there's a proliferation of this genre called sissy porn and forced feminization porn, sissy hypno porn, which is another thing that
what is it?
It's forced feminization is where the person in the video is being forced to wear women's clothes, behave in stereotypical feminine ways, and theoretically against his will, but he secretly loves it. And then the hypno version is where they kind of put the listener or watcher in the position of being that person and experiencing those things. And from what my colleagues who researched this have found, is that this is having a profound influence on all these men that we see everywhere on social media, perceiving themselves as women and taking female hormones and growing breasts. And, they post all this stuff on social media constantly, and, it's one thing to do this stuff in your house and, in the privacy of your own home, but now to be emboldened that you're being affirmed and celebrated in the wider culture, and that women especially are expected to accept that you too are now women, whether you want to be in sports, whether you want to be in prisons, whether you want to be in women's private bathroom areas, whether you want to be in lesbian only spaces, whatever it is, that's, you know, trans rights right there, is the right to have what you want, even if it impinges on somebody else.
You mentioned on somebody else's podcast that on the dating apps, transgender women, they have to be considered women.
First of all, Christina, I have to take issue with you calling a man a transgender woman.
Well, okay. I'm just saying.
I can't stop you from using that terminology.
You can stop me. You can stop me. I understand. What I'm trying to say is a man who has turned himself into a woman through synthetic sexual manipulation. No. Okay, what is it? What is it?
A man can't turn himself into a woman, and a woman can't turn herself into a man. That's denial.
No, I'm not. I'm not saying. Listen.
Okay, this is.
I'm not saying.
Hear
that's
how
why I call
it?
them transgender women and transgender men, because
no.
They're not biological women and men.
Well, yes, they are. What makes them not biological women or men? They call themselves surgery.
Right.
They've had cosmetic surgery and they've taken some drugs that
well, what I'm saying
their
is
body from
they
the
are
inside
not
out.
They have through surgery and drugs, they've taken on for example, the characteristics of the sex other than the sex they actually are.
First of all, I want to say that many of them have not done anything. The men on the dating apps. At this point, it's what we call self-ID. You do not have to take these drugs that destroy your body. You do not have to have the cosmetic surgeries or mutilate your genitals. You don't have to do any of that. All you have to do is declare yourself the opposite sex. But again, well, that's the way it is, Christina.
Yeah.
I didn't. But also, if a man attempts to simulate the form of a woman, all he is a man who is medicalized. And that's what we could call them. Men who have medicalized, women who have medicalized. We can call them, I call them LARPers, live action role players. We can call them female or male impersonators. We can call them men pretending to be women, women pretending to be men. We can call them men who wish to be perceived as women. There are many things to call them, but there's no such thing as transgender, and a man can't be any kind of woman. They're a subset of men. They're not a subset of women. And women are not trans men. They're a subset of women. So men who call themselves women, no matter how much or little they've medicalized, they're heterosexual men. They are not gay men. These men are not gay. And they call themselves lesbians or transbians. And they go on to dating apps and try to get same-sex attracted women, lesbians and bisexual women, to go on dating, to date them and have sex with them. And the women are not allowed to say on dating apps that they only want to date women. We could call them biological women, but I like to just say women, because women are women, and we don't need a qualifier like cis or biological. We don't use those words. So women can't say they only want to date women. They get kicked off the dating apps. Same with men. If men say that they won't date heterosexual women who call themselves gay men, then they're done. They can't say that. And in spaces, these men pretending to be women go into lesbian only spaces. And there's a thing called the cotton ceiling. They go into the lesbian only spaces and try, or, it's pests, they're sex pests. Let's just say they're sex pests and they're annoying. And I have experienced this and I don't like it.
What's the
and they're
cotton
voyeuristic.
ceiling?
The cotton ceiling is a term that was coined by a man pretending to be a woman who wanted to have sex with lesbians for the barrier, just like the glass ceiling is a barrier for women to not rise above. The cotton ceiling is the barrier posed by lesbians' underwear that these men pretending to be women have trouble crossing. There, and from that term has been coined the boxer ceiling, which is the barrier that heterosexual women face when they try to have sex with gay men who don't want to have sex with women, because these women call themselves gay men and they want to be perceived by gay men as gay men and have sex with gay men, even though they have female vulvas and, you know, etc., shall we say.
I want to talk about people who call themselves non-binary.
Mhm.
You know,
Okay.
I'm going to tell you honestly, I have a real problem standing in front of one person and calling them they. It feels Orwellian to me. I'm looking at you, you're one entity. I don't know what party you're having in your pants or in your heart. I see you as one entity. So to call you they, to me, is too radical a shift of the lexicon.
Why would you then? Why would you play along?
Well, my plan, if you want to know my plan, is to whatever that person's name is just to keep saying that person's name.
Well, why don't you just correctly sex them and call them the pronoun that's appropriate?
If you don't want to have a I mean, look, I understand all these people who are doing this. I can't explain it, but I understand there's a lot of, I don't know, fetish, but also suffering or whatever in this. And so I just want to negotiate my way in a way that is, but I see what you're saying is that if you don't insist on reality, then you're actually part of the problem in terms of, you know, I mean, I was very shocked when I went to the hospital the other day. I told this to Jennifer. I went to the hospital the other day and I was asked what my preferred pronoun is.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm standing here right here in front of you.
It's
You know?
infuriating. But I want to talk about kindness. This is a big issue.
Yes.
I want to talk about kindness and the idea that we need to be kind and use somebody's preferred pronouns because that's the right thing to do. It's the kind thing to do, and we don't want to hurt anybody. But to me, it's the ultimate in unkindness to reinforce a delusion. Like if you said that you were Napoleon or Jesus or a dump truck, would it be kind for me to address you as Napoleon or Jesus or a dump truck? I don't think so. I think that the kindest thing that we can do for people is to tell them the truth. And
well, no, I would feel that you were imposing something on me. I would feel annoyed or insulted because you're trying to tell me you're something that I clearly see.
No, but I mean, if we're being kind and you think that you're Jesus,
right?
Do we say, "Oh, hello, Jesus. It's so nice to see you, Jesus. You know, how is the cross today?" Like, is it, you know, how are your wounds? Is that how we treat somebody? Is that kind? Like, I don't think it is. I think the kindness, like they say that a bitter truth is kinder than a sweet lie. I didn't make that up. But you know, I don't really think that, like, the analogy is often made about anorexia. And we all
Jennifer
probably know anorexics. And would we not only prescribe liposuction and weight loss drugs to somebody who thought that they were enormously obese, yet were skeletal? We wouldn't do that to affirm them in their anorexia. And also, if we had a friend who was with anorexia, we wouldn't say, "Oh yes, you're really, really fat. Like I'm gonna address you and treat you like a person who's clearly fat I'm going to say is that, will that chair support you? You're so fat. I don't know. Maybe you should sit on this more substantial chair. Like, here, let's go get some diet food. Like, no, we wouldn't. We tell them to eat a sandwich. See a doctor, eat a sandwich, don't over exercise, just try to get a better grip on reality. That's what we do for people who are confused about reality, who are living in a delusion. We do not promote their delusion.
Well, it's so interesting
That's
because
mean and criminal.
I found this company. It's called Folks Health. Have you heard of it?
Yes.
Could you talk about that for a minute?
Well, Folks is one of several companies that are running a business that provides wrong sex hormones and other drugs over the internet and through the mail. And it works like a club. And you join the club and you're a member and you pay a certain amount every month and they send you these hormones through the mail, and you don't have to deal with anybody who might not think that this is a good idea. And they do specifically market to same-sex attracted people, women, lesbians, and I'm sure gay men. I mean, they realize that that's their best market. But now they'll take anyone's kid.
They call themselves the first major queer and transventure-backed company to offer virtual care and prescriptions for hormone replacement therapy and sexual health. Now, what I find interesting is the CEO, A.G. Breitenstein. You know, she did make a good point about, she said, well, I don't know anybody in this whole community. Of course, she has all the letters. She's talking about all the letters, who hasn't gone to the doctor and, you know, been treated like SH blank blank T, you know, because of who they are. And which is why she has created this haven for everybody. It might very well be a haven, but it is also a venture that's looking to make money off of the transgender, transhuman, that whole big market that they're evolving, you know. And one of the things that she has on that website is the pronoun talk. And there's a guide to talking to people about your pronouns. I just want to read it to you because I thought, boy, this is really aggressive. The Folks Guide on how to share your new pronouns, a guide for all ages, says things like, some people in organizations may have used or are currently using a misleading phrase, preferred pronouns. So that's a misleading phrase. But this is important. Pronouns are solid boundaries, not preferences. When you are asking someone to respect your pronouns, you're asking them to respect you and your authentic gender expression. And then later on, it says, you can change your pronouns as many times as you need to. And you can use as many different pronouns as you want. Your community might take a little while to get on board, but try to practice patience and kindness through the process. It's never your job to educate about pronouns.
I see so much of this propaganda. Maybe, you know, you haven't seen that much of it, but
no,
there's a ton. Yeah, there's a ton. It's all like that. But I just want to say that you don't have to go as far as Folks to see a business model of promoting the idea that you're born in the wrong body, and that you need to be medically fixed in order to be your authentic self or whatever. You just don't have to go that far. Planned Parenthood gives out wrong sex hormones with informed consent to anybody who's 18 on the first visit. And there's a documentary coming out with a lot of detransitioners called the Detrans Diaries that has detransitioners on camera telling their experience of going to Planned Parenthood and getting hormones that quickly. One woman got them over the phone in a half hour. And the reason I cite detransitioners is because they are really the people that we need to listen to, because they have nothing invested in not telling the truth. They are not trying to make money. They're being vilified both by their former community of people with opposite sex ideation and by a lot of people for having made very stupid decisions, people say, and it's their fault, they should have known. So they're getting it from all sides.
Yeah.
And so they're saying some really interesting things, both men detransitioners who are now trying to live without a penis, and the ones I've talked to and heard, gay men who, had that issue of internalized homophobia, which was weaponized, and they were told, oh yeah, you're really a woman, that's why you have those feelings of same-sex attraction and liking dresses and all that kind of, anyway. And then the women, they don't have breasts anymore, they had elective hysterectomies. Have you heard this? Gender affirming hysterectomies from
Oh
Boston
my
Children's
God.
Hospital. So
Oh my.
anyway, yeah, detransitioners are the people who have the best information at this point, and the doctors who have treated them.
So it's
gender
kind of a
affirming hysterectomy.
sterilization situation going on here too, huh?
Well, that's why we call it gay eugenics, because they've targeted primarily gay people for castration and sterilization. And do you know about the kids, that the vast majority of children who have opposite sex ideation or want to play with the wrong toys or don't conform to sex-based stereotypes of little girls or little boys, if not affirmed as the opposite sex, the vast majority of those kids will grow up to be lesbian, gay, or bisexual. Not all, but a great majority. We don't like to say that kids have a sexuality, but by the time they're teenagers and have finished puberty, most of them realize that they're just gay, lesbian, or bisexual. And it's really interesting how nonconformity correlates so highly with future homosexuality or bisexuality. So these kids who are being affirmed as the opposite sex are the next generation of gay people, and they're being sterilized, castrated, chemically castrated with puberty blockers and wrong sex hormones, and being affirmed as the opposite sex, told that's their authentic self, that they're wrong and they need to be fixed. And that's what they're doing to gay people these days.
I watch a lot of TV, and I used to watch I Am Jazz. I used to watch that, and I was with Jazz all the way through her surgery, which was a nightmare because there were all kinds of problems, and so, or his surgery. And now Jazz has had the surgery. Jazz has big boobs. Jazz is what apparently he wanted, and now has blown up like a balloon and has, is very fragile psychologically. And so I'm wondering if some of these issues that you have just discussed are at the crux of the problem that Jazz is experiencing right now.
Well, I don't know if people know that with these little boys and little girls who are medicalized so early, their puberty has been stopped,
Yes.
and that's irreversible, that they will never develop sexual function. So Jazz, he does not have sexual function. He's never had an orgasm, and he never will. And so not only do the blockers impact brain development, cognitive development, social development, bone development, but if a boy is blocked and then goes on to wrong sex hormones, he is left with a toddler-sized penis, and he never develops. You need puberty to develop sexually as well as in every other way. It's a normal stage of development, and you can't eliminate it. So you can't take a person with no sexuality and put them in a world where everybody else has normal sexual and other functions, brain and everything, and then expect them to fit in like how he isn't a full human being, not through
Expect him
any
to be
fault of his own.
happy.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, in order to have a relationship with another adult, you have to have the sexual component, even if you decide to set that aside and not make that a part of that relationship. You can't, I mean, unless you can find another person who's similarly been mutilated and blocked, and they also don't understand human sexuality or have any sexual response, and their brain has also been similarly, you know, mutilate, whatever, you know,
Rearranged. Yeah.
impacted somehow. So if we're expecting him to behave like either a normal man or a normal woman, well, he can't, because he's been drugged since he was it 10 or 11? So he
I
was
think a little
probably,
later.
I think they blocked him at 11, but I'm not sure.
Was it 11?
The
Is that
implant,
early?
I don't know, but they put the implant in his arm,
Oh
and he
my
had a lot of
God.
trouble with it, and they kept it in. So he, it seems like he might have grown up to be a gay man. He was a little boy who liked sparkles and mermaids, and he wanted to wear a girl's bathing suit, and a lot of times it's these parents that are afraid that their child might grow up to be a homosexual because their child is exhibiting early signs of homosexuality, and they don't want that. And there's documented evidence of mothers saying, I tried to beat it out of him. Susie Green of Mermaids had a son, and the father was very uncomfortable that the son was exhibiting these early signs of homosexuality. You can listen to her TED Talk, it's on the internet. And she had her child's puberty blocked, I believe, at 13. Dr. Norman Speck at Boston Children's has a video where he says that that's what he did. And she took her son Jack, or Jackie, to Thailand and had him castrated at 16.
You're
So
saying
these
that
kids,
these parents prefer to have their child castrated than to admit they're gay?
there's a few things going on. There's the parents who would rather have a straight daughter than a gay son, or a straight son than a lesbian daughter. And so they want to treat the early signs of homosexuality. This is not only religious parents, but we do see that among religious parents, that they want to trans away the gay. But we also see this other thing with more parents on the left, where they want to virtue signal how woke they are and how hip, and that they have this unicorn snowflake child. They have a they, them, or they have an opposite sex child than what was born, and they put the boy in girl's clothes and call him a butterfly.
Like
And
an
we see that.
accessory. Like the child is an accessory.
Do you know Charlize Theron has
Yes.
2 African-American adopted sons, and she's transing both of them? It's
God.
big in Hollywood, transing your kids.
I was reading on this website, it was a health website, that they are now going to move a lot of these companies that are developing the medications and the procedures and so on. They're taking them into rural America because there's less scrutiny and less negative attention from the academics and other people in the more populated areas. So now I guess they're going to kind of go underground to expand their repertoire of drugs and procedures by going into rural America.
When you talk about rural areas, California is trying to pass a bill to make California a sanctuary state for anybody, parent who is trying to trans their kid, but let's say the other parent, whether a divorced parent or a other parent, doesn't want the kid to be put on blockers or wrong sex hormones or socially transitioned at school. That parent can bring the child to California and have their medical transition paid for in California and not be interfered with. This is also any minor who can get out of a state which won't trans minors can come to California and become a ward of the state and be medically transitioned for free. So that's what California is doing.
That's absolutely shocking. No parent has a right to do that to a child before the child is of, an
Or
adult.
does the state have the right to take anybody's child?
I really fear for the children of this country. This country is just so hostile to
even
its
as
children.
Yeah, even as states try to enact bills to protect minors from medicalization, either by doctors who force this on them, the parents are well-meaning in many cases, and they believe this propaganda that their kid will commit suicide if they're not medically transitioned, which we have not seen being happening. That's just a fake study and propaganda. But anyway, if they truly think that medicalizing their child into the opposite sex is what their child needs, and they feel that that's the only thing that's going to save the child's life, they're going to be able to come to California and do it because, California is a gold rush for medicalization of children and adults.
I bet you there's some big money behind that decision.
It's a gold mine. And in Oregon, if you're 15, you don't have to have your parents' consent to get a double mastectomy at 15. And I think in
15.
Washington too. Yeah. And in California, Ricardo Lara, the insurance commission, passed a bill or a law without really any feedback that says that insurance companies have to pay for elective double mastectomies of girls at any age. They don't have to be over 18 or anything. And it's, if they think that their chest is wrong because they think they're a boy, that insurance has to pay for this surgery. They cannot refuse.
I want to thank you for coming on the show. We've run out of time.
I just want to say that I mostly want to talk to people who consider themselves allies of LGBT people, gay people, lesbians, bisexuals, who think that transgenderism is just another way to be gay, that it's gay 2.0. And I just want to tell people that being an ally for the alphabet and for synthetic sex identities is not a good way to be allies to lesbians, gays, and bisexuals. You really need to look a little deeper and listen to people who are questioning these ideas, because we understand you just mean well, but you're being groomed and you're hearing a lot of propaganda. But thank you, Christina. I'm so glad to have had this opportunity.
Well, this show is going to air this Friday, and I think you'll be educating a lot of people on a lot of stuff. You certainly educated me.
Thank you.